Wholeness, welcome. This is Josh of Inner Skilled, and today I have Erica Siegel with me. Erica, how's it going today?
Good. Great day. Thank you. How are you?
Oh, it's pretty cool. We finally got rain for so long here in rural Illinois where I'm at. So yeah, everything's coming back to life. So that's a plus. Yeah. All right. So standard question: Who's Erica Siegel, and what kind of work does she do?
So, I am an acupuncture physician here in Florida, and I've been doing this for 20 years, um, utilizing all the ancient knowledge that was passed down, and watching people heal themselves just by utilizing their own body's frequencies. Um, I grew up in New York and thought I was going to be an architect. That was my direction as a kid. And then gradually decided to do something different. In college, really got into studying philosophy and religion and ancient civilizations. And that really took my attention more so. And then started looking into therapies, different psychotherapies as well. And then my first trade right out of undergrad was feng shui. I found a program in feng shui. I was living in New York at the time, and it was like starting the next week. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. It combines the basis of architecture and design with basic common sense on how energy moves, and also combining with like Taoist, Buddhist type principles. And so dove headfirst into that. And by the end of that training, I was living in San Diego, and there's a really good acupuncture school there, Pacific College. And so it was a natural progression because the system of feng shui is really the same base system, the same principles as the acupuncture systems. And so it was a really natural progression, and I've been doing it ever since. Loving it.
Well, cool. And maybe you can speak a little bit more about how you linked ancient architecture to this too. I'm fascinated by that as well. But I don't know much at all about acupuncture, and I'm fascinated now. So you can just kind of start from the basic level here, and then how feng shui ties into that. I haven't even heard that, and I don't know much about feng shui either. I'm just very general things. I know acupuncture involves needles on certain places on the
Hmm.
body for therapeutic effect. I mean, that's a horrible, gross oversimplification. I mean, yeah, where do you know where to stick these things, right? And
Hmm.
what do they do? So I think that's enough. I don't know. I mean, it's such a huge field, I'm sure, but
Yes,
I don't know. Whatever you feel kind of called to say about, yeah, these things. Yeah.
sure. So it really goes back to Taoist principles. Basically, the Tai Chi, where you have, from one comes two, and then the dance of the two together. So from oneness into duality, and from the two comes everything, right? So that interplay. And so from that interplay springs all the things of life and nature. And that includes what we call the five elements or five phases. Sometimes elements can sound too static. Um, and so really they're phases because everything's always in motion, right? And so, and those include, uh, the wood element, the fire element, earth, metal, and water. And so those particular phases or elements are then um, used and represent all things. And so that could be everything from your different organ systems. And from the organ systems, each one is related to a different channel that goes throughout the body. You could think of it like the rivers that go throughout the body of energy. And that also relates to nature. So when you look outside yourself into nature, it reflects back internal, what's going on inside. And so sometimes I tell people the different patterns that we look at in, traditional East Asian medicine, the patterns, they're almost like weather patterns. So, if you have dampness outside, we're in Florida, there's a lot of moisture. And so that moisture can reflect back into the body. You might see sinus issues or, swelling in the joints or things like that will reflect the dampness in the body. Same thing with dryness. If you have dry weather outside, you can have dry weather inside. And we see that a lot, especially with women around menopausal age. Liquids or fluids start to dry up a little bit. And so we tend to see these different patterns at different parts of people's lives. Men and women have more tendencies. And so, and even children have, their different tendencies. Children are very yang, which, when you have the one becoming two, the yin and the yang, children are very yang. They're like the fire of life, like the lightness and the moving quickly. And then as we get older, we move more into the yin aspect of life where things are heavier, things, the energy kind of tends to sink down. And, we just tend to have less energy and a little more stillness versus movement, early in life versus late in life. And this can go really even into different emotions. So each element and phase relates to different emotions as well. So, when people have, let's say, a trauma in their life and they wind up having a lot of grief, well, grief can be ruled, or grief is the function of the lungs and large intestine. Right. So sometimes you'll see, if someone's had trauma, they might move into, asthma, or colon issues, when they're stressed or when their grief is activated. So there's so many different correlations. And as an acupuncturist, my job is to figure out or kind of tease out which patterns are at the top of the chain for somebody, because each pattern has a laundry list of different symptoms that can go along with it. And so as you treat the pattern, so when I treat a pattern, someone's laundry list can start to fall away. So instead of, taking a med for this and chasing the symptoms, if we get at the base root pattern, then all these different symptoms that seemed unrelated, but to me, I'm like, oh, this fits very nicely into these one or two patterns. Treat the pattern with specific acupuncture points that have functions to actually balance out that pattern. And there's herbs that do that as well.
It always fascinates me to just contemplate, first off, how these ancient masters came up with these points, how they detected, and my guess is meditation, deep
Yeah.
contemplative meditation and testing too. But just to
Yeah.
know that all these different points connect in a channel and then the actual specific location. And so could you help me understand why a needle in one specific point has the effect that it does?
Sure.
What does it do when you stick a needle in that point?
So each point has a different frequency to it. This is not something we learned in acupuncture school, but this is something beyond in my more studies of consciousness and frequency and learning that there's the different frequencies of the points. And we are frequency, right? We are electric beings. And so by using metal in an area that is electrical in and of itself, but also, you have water, you're mostly water, right? And so we're actually conducting electricity, even though it doesn't necessarily feel like electricity when you get acupuncture. Um, there's actual electricity being these messages through the electrical system being sent up to the brain, and then the brain self-regulates. So, for example, if there's several functions of a point, um, I could be using a point for one or two of those functions, but the brain will know, the brain is aware of what to do with that point. Like it knows which function to take and say, hey, we require sending healing chemicals out to, this particular area. And so really it's a self-regulating system. We are getting the body to heal itself.
It's just I was just saying, it's just fascinating how certain things, certain issues will, well, like the body keeps the score. This book and this thing,
Yeah.
kind of everything is in the body, and then specific places in the body, and then organs. It's just it's so bizarre to me in a way. I mean, you would look at these organs and they're just like, what is that? And then to know that like one point can have all these specific effects and that the brain knows how to do it, it's really kind of mysterious in a way.
It is.
And now you can even, what are some of these other techniques like cupping and then dry needling? Talk about all the different, all the different, what other kind of variations you have?
Yeah.
And how they make a difference.
Yeah. So one more thing besides conducting electricity with the points is there's actual anatomical things going on, physiological changes with acupuncture that are measurable, and you can see, if you look at studies, you can see what's actually going on. There's one thing called the P38 pathway, and that activates the body's cellular repair, cellular regeneration, ability to neuroprotect, ability for the body to use antioxidants more efficiently. So this pathway is activated with acupuncture. So that's one of the more Western ways to look at how it's working or why it's working. So other adjunct therapies besides acupuncture, herbs are a big one. I call acupuncture and herbs the 1-2 punch. They work great on their own, but together it's much quicker typically to treat any issue. And that's even in grad school for acupuncture. That's half of it's acupuncture, half is herbalism, outside of all the other, learning anatomy and physiology and all that stuff. But so the herbs are very important, and we do polypharmacy. So it's very rare that we use one herb alone. We say that like if you use one substance, it's more easily pushes the body too far in the direction of that herb. Like, so for example, if there's a cold bitter herb, that's gonna make the digestion upset. And so in a formula that's more cold and bitter, there's going to be a few herbs in there with just a little bit of sweet and neutral to make sure that it doesn't harm the digestion. And that's why it's pretty rare to actually see side effects when using, herbs, or the Chinese herbs anyway, the formulas themselves. So herbs are a big deal. Cupping is just as old as acupuncture, and it's the use of suction cups over areas of tension or old injury, where there might be stuck blood and energy. Like let's say you had an old shoulder injury and it's still bothering you years later. Well, chances are through that healing, some of the blood didn't get moved out, right? Or if you have tension in the traps, which is very common, when there's tension, everything slows down a little bit. It's like a traffic jam for for the blood and fluids. And so the cups suck up that stuck blood and it just brings it up towards the surface, and your lymph system flushes it out. So it's a self-cleaning. It's a way to self-clean. Some people will lancet the area to get out if there's really old stuck blood, just to pull some of that out. I only do that in extreme cases, but it's pretty common. And scraping or gua sha is also a very, very old technique that we use in traditional East Asian medicine. We just traditionally we use a piece of bone, and you scrape the area, and you put some oil on so it doesn't hurt as much. And then what happens is any of that stuck blood I was talking about comes up towards the surface, and then lymph system flushes it out. So again, a self-cleaning mechanism. I also do laser acupuncture with cold lasers, red light and blue light. And that is great for people that are needle sensitive because there's really no sensation with the lasers. So great for kids, or people that are maybe on blood thinners and have trouble, like with bruising. And then what else? There's also, the dry needling. So dry needling is just orthopedic acupuncture being done usually by physical therapists that get very minimal training in acupuncture, and it's just into the trigger points, which is great. We learned that in orthopedic acupuncture, but the story is actually there was a physical therapist that went to acupuncture school for a short time, dropped out, started a corporation called Kineticor, and proceeded to use the term dry needling instead of acupuncture to skirt the licensure and do weekend courses. Yeah, it was a weekend course that it started.
I didn't know there was about weekend warriors here. Yeah.
Now I think maybe the training is a little longer, maybe a month of weekend courses. It's pretty easy to learn needling. It's not that difficult, but the way that dry needling is done is very intense compared to almost all acupuncture styles. Like there's no need to badger the body. It's like your body is smart. It knows what to do with the needle. There's no need to really badger it. It's kind of like the style I liken to shaking a crying baby versus calming down the family in the room so that the frequency can all match at a nice calm level. So it's great for some people but it generally gives acupuncture a bad name because it tends to hurt more in terms of the intensity of needling, whereas regular acupuncture, there's barely any feeling to it, depending on the acupuncturist's style and how heavy-handed they are. So
this is skill level.
I tend to be a gentle needler because that's how I like it myself. I like it gentle. It works. So it even works with, if you have an amputee, like let's say someone's missing their leg, but they still have leg pain, right? You can actually tape needles to the area and it'll still work.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Crazy.
It could treat phantom leg or phantom limb pain.
Yeah,
that's
limb
wild.
pain. But the point is, there's no need to badger. The energy can do it. Your body can do it.
Have I seen things where they put they attach something to the needle? Is it like electric?
Yeah, electric.
What is that
stim.
called?
Mm-hmm.
Electric stim.
We just call it E-Stim or electric stimulation, and that's often used more so for orthopedic issues. So it gives a little bit of a pulse, and just it pushes the energy a little bit more. But I tend to let the body do what it needs to do without the electric stim first. And usually that works. If it doesn't, then I'll consider electric stimulation. Really, it depends on the practitioner and what techniques they prefer. There's so many different techniques. Over the years, someone comes up with a new technique, it just builds on the others. There's just more techniques. It's not like out with the old, in with the new. It's like, oh, and here's another another option and another option. And so so every acupuncturist is so different. We all have, different techniques and mentors and different tools in our tool bags. In Florida
Probably
here, we can actually
schools.
do
Yeah.
different schools
And
as well.
approaches. Yeah.
Which teachers are at which schools, and who you gravitate towards at the school. So um, I also do what's called acupuncture point injection therapy using homeopathics. And that's been really an efficient way to deal with a lot of
I was
different
just going to
issues.
ask you about homeopathy. So tell me about that technique. How does that?
So there's different homeopathics, and they're super safe. It's about the safest thing because the substances are diluted down to the point where there's really no active ingredient, but the frequency and the essence of the substances is there and still doing the job. And so by injecting into acupuncture points, it can just make things very, very quick. For example, there's one called Traumeel, which is mostly arnica, which is a very popular homeopathic for sprains, strains, bruises, just all sorts of itises, pain in general. And so, let's say somebody has elbow pain, they've got tennis elbow, right? Well, the acupuncture is going to do a great job all on its own. But if I'm able to inject a little bit of Traumeel into there, it just makes it so quick, so much quicker.
And it's just a little bitty amount. I mean,
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
imagine it's just
Mm-hmm.
just a little bit.
Yeah, like in
Okay.
each point, I might do like 0.3 cc in a point. Very
So
small
if
amount.
you're up for it, hopefully you won't charge me here. I guess you could. If I mean, just as an example here, I'm not going to hold you to this as medical advice over over the internet here without coming into your clinic or whatever. I well. I'm grateful that I only have a few minor, ailments or whatever. But what I want to ask before is my dear mother, she fell on a garden hose and broke her back, and she's up
Oh.
walking around. She went to one doctor and said they wanted to inject some kind of like cement next to her spine because it's broken like two places. And
Mm-hmm.
this is
Mm-hmm.
crazy that I mean, they can't really put a cast or anything, and she can't just lay around in bed all day waiting for it to heal.
Mm-hmm.
But acupuncture could help her too, right? Have you ever seen cases like this? And what would you do? What would you recommend if she went to go see an acupuncture? Or what could she expect,
Yeah.
I guess? Or what are some options?
So yes, acupuncture is great to speed up the healing, the body's natural ability to heal the area. And what's fun is one of the techniques that I love most is called the balance method, and we don't even have to touch her back. Like there's points that influence the back, all the channels that run through the area, influencing the bones, influencing whatever else is affected from her injury, just by using points from the elbows down, knees down, have some of the biggest influential points on the body. And so depending on someone like her, depending on what position she's comfortable in, right? If she's in pain, sometimes laying on a massage table can be a little tough. So some of my older patients really prefer being in, we have recliners as well, so being in a recliner can be very helpful to make the treatment more comfortable. But also then, because she has the break, I would consider doing that Traumeel I was just talking about into the back area. So we just do it right next to the area, and then it seeps in. So it's not like we're going like right into the spine, but right next to it, and then it reaches the area, speeds up the blood flow there, so that she can get all those healing chemicals faster. And then other things, there's herbs as well, to help speed that up. There's topicals. Topicals are great. The topical herbs. Yeah. Maybe some light therapy as well. Red light therapy.
Now, before I talk about my things, insurance I forget how this works. Do most people's insurance, does it cover it? Does it depend on state, or how do the payment and things work?
It really depends on the policies themselves. So it's usually dependent on not just the state, but the particular companies in that particular state, and then the particular policy that somebody has. So it's all over the place right now. Some people have some coverage, some people have no coverage. It's a real like spotty kind of situation.
Kind of a
But
dice roll, yeah.
I just do Superbills for people, which means they pay at time of service, or I have packages. And then if they do have coverage, I can give them a super bill which has all the codes on it that are necessary for them to get reimbursed for whatever rate that their company will pay back. If you pay, for example, my treatments are $135, maybe the policy pays $100, so then you might get a check back for $100 from your company. But it just depends. I tell people to call their insurance company and find out if they're covered for acupuncture, and if they are, for what. Because sometimes they'll be like, oh, we'll only pay for, nausea during pregnancy. Like, how's that going to help my back pain? So it just depends on the policy.
Due diligence, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I had one of these checked out by I think a skin doctor years and years ago when I still went to doctors. And I'm not
Mm-hmm.
anti-doctor. Like if I break a bone or I need a
Yeah,
surgery, of
emergency is
course,
great. Yeah.
absolutely, yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
uh, these were, I think they called them benign fatty tumors, and there's just
Mm-hmm.
lumps around.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
talked to another acupuncturist, and he said there's a technique called surrounding the dragon. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
so I think that's one of the things he recommended. If you had any other
Mm-hmm.
advice, the other thing is I've got kind of this energetic blockage in my right nostril, and it kind of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
blocks in my ear too. I can feel it,
Yeah.
especially
The
when I meditate
eustachian.
sometimes. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
some people have told me that, with yogic breathing, one side, if your body's too hot, then it might breathe through one nostril more. If it's too cold, it might
Mm-hmm.
breathe through another. I do notice when the air temperature is cooler, it's not likely there. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
waking up in the morning, sometimes it's more prevalent. And I haven't
Mm-hmm.
really
Mm-hmm.
pinned down exactly all the kind of conditions for when it's like that. But
Yeah.
I've also heard some people say naturally, our breathing is supposed to alternate naturally between one nostril for a while, then that one's supposed to close up, give it a break, then the other one kicks in, right? So yeah, I don't know. I have had my nose broken twice, I think, when I was a kid playing baseball,
Mm-hmm.
which
Mm-hmm.
was I think that might have a lot to do with it too,
Sure.
and some trauma with that.
Yeah. So there might be some scar tissue blocking the passages there. So there is something called serrapeptase. Have you heard of that enzyme? It eats up scar tissue. So if there is scar tissue there from past injuries, you might want to consider some serrapeptase, nattokinase, lumbrokinase. These are things that help eat up, scavenge for any of that. So those are good. But remember, I was talking about the weather patterns. So when you have, fatty cysts, when you have congestion, this all points to that damp pattern, which is funny that that's the one I was talking about. So yeah, it would be a damp pattern. And so dampness can mix with cold or it can mix with heat. So it just depends. Sometimes, the heat you could think of more like a smoldering, like the end of a fire, like the smoldering end of a fire with that's had water poured on it. So that's, I mean, if it's better in the cold weather versus hot weather. That gives us a clue that it might be more of a damp heat situation versus damp cold. So there's specific points and specific herbs that deal with that pattern of damp heat and help your body to digest that the fluids, cool it off a little bit, and then tonify the organ systems, which is the spleen for the most part, in charge of creating that damp in the first place. So it's like kind of clear, like take off the wet blanket by clearing the damp, and then tonify the spleen energy, which is in charge of creating that damp in the first place.
Cool insights. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're
And
welcome.
it's pretty cool how alternative medicine puts a lot of emphasis on the spleen, where it just seems like Western medicine thinks it's just like the appendix or something. Like it's like completely pointless and they don't do anything with it. But it's so important, right? In alternative medicine.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
so important. Yeah. Yeah, it's huge on transforming and transporting your food and your drink into your chi and your blood. And so very important, yeah, recycling that blood.
So do you have any like overall health advice? Like, and then also what kind of issues do you see like in mass at your clinic? Is there anything that sticks out? I mean, I've got a few that I've heard about, but I want to hear, what you're dealing with the most these days, and how do you, I guess, kind of a brief overview of what you're doing to treat it, and if you're having success.
Yeah. I would say anxiety is kind of like a overarching thing for a lot of people, even though they might be coming in for something else. But if there's, anxiety running underneath, right, then addressing that is super important, because if people are in a state of, fight or flight, if they're in that, then they're just going to be creating more disease for themselves. Right. And so getting people into that parasympathetic state is what acupuncture helps do. And it's amazing. Like, people at the end of a treatment, they're like, "Oh my God, this is the most relaxed I've ever been." It's so great because you have all those feel-good chemicals running throughout your body. So I'd say, yeah, anxiety is the biggest thing. And yeah, there's specific acupuncture points to help with that. A lot of them, actually, a lot of points are great for that. When you look at the names of the acupuncture points, a lot of them actually have spirit spirit type names to them. So the recognition that there's no separation of the body and the mind, it's just an illusion. And so trusting, I would say some of the biggest advice would be trusting one's body, trusting my body is doing what it needs to do right now. And when it seems out of balance, it's telling me something. It's giving me information, and it's that way, we could use that as a way to remember to trust our bodies and trust life and trust our ability to heal ourselves.
Well, I mean, I was just do people say what they're anxious about? I mean, it's a kind of almost a spiritual cliche to say, depression is living in the past, anxiety is living in the future. I mean, do people just have these feelings that things are going to get bad, or is there, do they say anything in general? Are you getting anything? And then, yeah, I would echo that trust, and I would say if people, you almost have to trust yourself to live like a healthy lifestyle, like healthy diet, healthy exercise, all the basics, right? But if people aren't doing that, I think it kind of runs hand in hand, like they're not trusting themselves, but then they're maybe not care. So that's where I think the heart comes in
Right,
too.
the apathy.
Apathy.
Yeah.
And people, a lot. I mean, I was shocked when I started waking up and doing a little bit of spiritual practice, how much I actually hated myself and hated other people, and didn't even really realize the degree. It was kind of shocking, and how that was affecting everything in my life, pretty much how people were treating me, how I was treating other people, not so good,
Yeah.
and how an amazing turnaround that was when I would just kind of level off the ill will,
hmm
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I would say with acupuncture, generally when you're getting acupuncture, after you're laying there for, usually a treatment is, 30 to 45 minutes around there. After about 10 minutes, like holding on to any thoughts, past, future, anything, it just falls away and it leaves one in a state of peace and being present and just being. And the more people do acupuncture, the more it's like training wheels to have that peace throughout their lives and not just while they're getting acupuncture. It starts to, some people say after they've got acupuncture for, the first time and they're like, I had like, I was in like a euphoric kind of state for a couple of days. And, people that are living in the present, it'll just be a natural thing. There's less of a contrast. But for people that are living in that anxious state or, living in the past or future, having that state of being, that's new for them. And so it is like the training wheels, and people do wind up changing their lives when they're getting acupuncture on a regular basis. I mean, people will change jobs, they'll change partners. I mean, like things start to really shift because of that presence. It's
Well, very
beautiful.
cool.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And that's the ideal. And hopefully we see more and more of that. I've also heard, though, of kind of not the opposite, but another effect where people, they kind of use it as a Band-Aid almost. And so they're not addressing the kind of core issues and core patterns that keep perpetuating the same issues. Have you seen this? And if you have, what do you recommend for things like that? Now, I would say maybe eventually, actually, maybe they start getting into more habits like this, that when they start feeling that way, and then start making other choices in their lives and start doing
Yeah.
other things, so that hopefully that's where it starts getting rid of old habit patterns and starting new ones. But
Yeah.
I'd imagine that some people use it as, the way I mentioned before. Have you seen this,
More
or what do you do
using
with your?
acupuncture as a crutch for them. Um, I mean, I could see with people that are just chasing symptoms. Yeah. Because for someone that has like a chronic issue that keeps coming back, if their lifestyle, if they have just something that they're working against, like the inertia of their lifestyle. But that's fine. You know what? If someone is in that state, no judgment here. It's just where they're at.
Yeah.
If if they have no shame about it, I'm not going to put shame on them for it.
No.
Like
Yeah, sorry,
it's
that's not what I was getting at,
oh,
I guess.
okay,
But
yeah.
it did come off that way. I'm sorry. It's just like, yeah, this tough thing that if you kind of see some other things in someone, but you can't really tell them, what they should do
Oh,
differently,
but I
or
could.
what they could.
I could. No,
So there's a
my
family. Just go ahead.
My New Yorker comes out in me, and I'll be honest with people.
Sure.
What I'll do is I find that I'll find, whatever it is I'm seeing in them, right? At some point in my life, I'm sure that's something that I face, right? Because it's just a reflection of me at the same time. And so, maybe there's something about my experience. Maybe I have a story about whatever the scenario is. Oh, like here's a time in my life where I had shame for, eating a bunch of junk food or whatever it is. So I can go into my story, and then, that could be another way for them to reflect on themselves. Maybe it'll influence them maybe not, but that's okay.
Well, that's beautiful too. I love this saying, and it's kind of a twist on the mere teaching that what we see in others is something we've already
Mm-hmm.
addressed in ourselves, instead of it like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, oh, this is what I still need to work on, blame myself. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm seeing that horrible thing, it must mean there's something wrong with inside of me. Well, maybe not, but I like this
Or it's just
because
reflecting.
we can't really notice something unless we've had some kind of experience with it before, I think. So I like that. And I'll just say, like, I have a family member who goes chiropractor, right? It is a really good point, because it's just kind of like a serial thing. But to me, at first I thought, well, you're just treating a symptom and you're just kind of dependent on that now. But actually, that's a lot healthier than a lot of other alternatives that they could be doing. So it
Mm-hmm.
is a really good
Mm-hmm.
point. If they're just
Yeah.
not ready to make any kind of changes or do anything different, or, and older
It could
too,
be
right? So
little. It
there's,
could be little
yeah,
changes,
and
little tiny
exactly.
things.
Oh no, that's huge too. And most people won't. I think, at least in my own experience, I won't take something different because we think it's too little. It won't make a difference. But there's an old saying: "Drop by drop, the water bucket's filled." So cumulative. So don't think that it won't have any difference. These little things do matter, and of course, there's the butterfly effect too. But yeah, I
Yeah.
just I
Yeah.
just wanted to kind of see what your opinion and attitude were on that, and I really like leading from experience, like you said, and kind of discerning when to say what and how to do it. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I could usually tell like who's ready to dip their toe in or who's just like got a wall up, and it's like until they see some change, like forget talking about lifestyle until like they notice anything different in the symptom they came for. So sometimes it
Totally.
takes a little while, and sometimes someone is just some people just will jive with somebody else or some different modality, but I could usually tell when. Well, sometimes I'm wrong, but I could usually tell when like someone's like not into
Exactly. The
anything.
time has
Yeah.
to be right, right? And the time
Mhm.
has to be
Mhm.
right. So you
Yeah.
also do some you do some teaching around this too? I saw, I think in one of your videos, you had a book too, an author, and I think this
Yeah.
is a good place to start wrapping up, and you could talk a little bit about that. And then why don't you point people to how they can get in touch with you, kind of, and what else you have going on? Anything you want to
Yeah.
draw people's attention to, and then take everybody out on a that's listening still on a message that you'd like to leave.
Sure. So you can reach me at joyvisionacu.com. And that's one C in the Acu, joyvisionacu.com. I do some telehealth work when it comes to herbal consults, and also instructing people how to do the red light laser on themselves at home and instructing them with particular points they could be using for themselves or their children, their family. And that leads me into my book, which is, you could think of it like the cliff notes of acupuncture point functions. So, like I said before, each point might, one point might have like a laundry list of different functions. One might have one function, but the next might have 10 functions. And so it's a lot. Usually it's a textbook this thick to, learn all about these points, which is great. But for quick reference, I took my architectural training and created blueprints of each channel with the point functions right next to each point in somewhat abbreviated form to make it really easy to just reference each point and its functions. Within one page per channel or 2 pages per channel. So great for people that are doing body work, especially Asian body work. For quick reference, great for students that have to memorize hundreds of points and their functions. So it's called the Acupuncture Point Functions Charts and Workbook. It's on Amazon. But I made those charts when I was in school, and I required memorizing, and so I made these charts while I was memorizing, and also all my colleagues in my class, I would bring it for them every week as well. So, and then years later, one of my colleagues is a clinical supervisor at one of the schools in Chicago, and he was like, "Hey, I'm still using your charts, and the students are asking about them, so it's time to publish them." I was like, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea." So I did some work with some of the revised texts for reference for it, and put it out a few years ago. So yeah, and it's a great reference book for people that want to do treatments, acupressure or aculaser on themselves or their families at home. So like I can say, hey, turn to the stomach channel and let's go to this number, and you could see where it is. You could see what it's doing. So makes it pretty simple.
Well, right on. It was a pleasure having you here, and thanks for educating and bringing all these things to light. And
You're welcome.
I had a
Thanks
good
for having
time
me.
and learned a lot. You're welcome. So may all beings everywhere out there come to know their most optimal health and well-being for themselves and
Yes.
for their
And
loved ones, and maybe all
trust.
beings everywhere. Yes, and come to know that their deepest, most optimal trust too, because boy, is this society lacking that right now too, right? So,
Well, we're raising it up. So yeah.
all right. Bye now.
Bye. Take